Alright, we're going to start with the 12 steps that will help with drawing a better head. This is going to be kind of the same thing where you sort of start with measurements of the head. Mine are a little bit different, so hopefully you might find this to be helpful. So, number one is establish the tilt of the head. So what that means is determine whether or not the head is completely vertical, whether if it's to one side, to the left, to the right, back, or forward. So in this case, it's a little bit to the left. So that's what we want to do, is find out that angle. So sometimes it's easy just to hold your pencil to that angle, and if you can hold it and maintain that angle, you can establish your center line. Okay? So that's the first step. The second step is to establish where the top of the head is. So hopefully this is showing up on the video. I'll draw a little bit darker so you can see, and I'm gonna leave the lines in. Okay, so number 3 would be establish where the bottom of the chin is. Okay. And number 4 is where the brow ridge is. So the brow ridge means simply if you were to draw a line straight through the eyebrows, sort of ignoring the expression, because if you had a line running through the brow ridge, sometimes what you'll see is the brow might go up and over and down in some cases. In other cases, it might start up high and then move below it. So we want to draw a line that sort of ignores the expression. So here we're going to guesstimate the distance. And so to me, it seems to be about right here. So another tip is make sure you keep your lines fairly parallel as possible, because everything has to conform to the actual tilt of the head. So what you don't want is a straight line and then a line at an angle and another angle and another angle and then another straight line. So number 5 would be the top of the eyelid. And so in this case, this means here. And in other cases where you can see a little bit more clearly, it would be this little fold of the eyelid. So where the eyelid fold meets the eye socket. So it's hard to see in him, but we're going to guesstimate the distance between the brow ridge and the top of the eyelid. So I think it's about approximately there. So in other videos, I'm sure you'll see they usually show you the head, and then the measurement is the center of the eye. And that works, but the problem I find is that that sort of assumes that you're going to draw the eye to the correct size. So you could be nailing the center of the eye, but what if you draw the eye way too large, or in another case, way too small? So your placement is correct, but proportions aren't. So this shows you the placement and can kind of help maintain the proportions. So you know that your eye can't go above this line, it can only go below. So I suppose you could still end up with a similar issue, but I find that this is a little bit more helpful to at least have a landmark and then also kind of try and maintain the proportion instead of drawing in the center and then kind of guesstimating how much above and how much below. So you're doing twice the amount of guessing, where in this case you're sort of only guessing in one direction, which I think makes it a lot easier. Okay, so number 6, I would say the bottom of the nose. So in this case you have a couple of options. You can draw the actual shape of the nose, or you can just draw a line straight across. So in this case I'm sort of drawing a line from here to here, and then I'll put that shape in afterward. And the thing is to keep the drawing eraser friendly, so I think that I may have, since I'm sort of eyeballing this, put the chin up a little too high, so I'm probably going to have to move that down. So number 7, the middle of the mouth, not the top of the lip, not the bottom of the lip, but just the actual center. I find that that's a really easy thing to measure. So you don't even have to try and nail the actual shape just yet. We're just looking for placement. And then number 8, the labial mental fold, which is this fold here, which is the space between the bottom of the lip and the chin. So labial mental fold is just a combination of words between labio, which means lip, and then mental, which means chin. So labial mental fold. So I'd say that's about here. Okay, so I sort of misjudged where the chin should go by about a half an inch. So that's where I'm going to put it. Okay, so since I'm drawing this in colored pencil so you guys can see a little bit better, it might not erase as well. But in this stage you would want to erase your center line because it's you no longer need it. And then just leave your horizontal lines. And then number 9 is establish the shape or determine the shape of the head. So in this case, what the shape of the head means is what is, in a kind of a generic way, how would you describe this person's shape of the head? So it could be a combination of a sphere or a rectangle or a square or something like that. So in this case, I find that his head, excuse me, when I said face, I meant head. His head is longer than it is wider. So he would sort of fall into a generic category of rectangle. So we'll just sort of draw another rectangle here. And what this means is it doesn't have to be a straight rectangle. That means that it can taper wherever you want it to, but you know the basic idea. The basic idea is a rectangle with tapering toward the chin, for example, and rounding on the head. Okay, so this is what I mean by sort of just determine the shape of the head. Okay, so in other cases, somebody else might have a square head, right? So, and then the chin itself might be very wide, maybe not so pointy, and then a rounder head. So this is what I mean by shape of the head. And in my case, I would say include the hair. So in a lot of cases, I find that the hair itself gives a kind of structure to the character and the likeness. And for the record, since this is for absolute beginners, I'm not super concerned with a perfect likeness. The goal here is mostly to get you to draw a head that can start to resemble a head. So anyone who's got proportion issues, and so I mean just basically just anyone who wants to learn how the heck do I even start with drawing a head, something that looks halfway decent. And so anyone who's also watching this video who is already intermediate, this can help at least sharpen your skills. I find that it never hurts to revisit things which you may know, and it depends on the degree to which you feel you're an expert in some of those things. So We can always use as much practice as possible. Okay, so we now have our nine basic steps so far, and I'll talk a little bit about the last two steps. But basically, this is yeah, 9 steps, and I think it's already starting to look fairly okay in terms of an approximation. So in the beginning, I kind of leave my lines a little bit more geometric because I find it's a little bit easier to measure, and then as I go along, I would probably spend some more time to make them a little bit more organic. Okay, so you at this point you can start anywhere in on any of these features. So this is what's nice about this kind of 12 steps to drawing a head, is that it doesn't really matter where you start because you have the alignment as close as possible. Okay, so a lot of people like to start from the top and go down, so we can do that just for the sake of convenience. Okay, so what I want to do now is sort of superimpose some of the features that I'm seeing. Okay. And I just am going to sort of roughly hatch something instead of actually drawing a line, but just to give it a little bit more volume and depth, so you can see how this sort of evolves. So here's my line for the left eyebrow. Okay, so here's my line. So one thing to pay attention to is it has a peak here, and then it comes down, and then it comes down a lot more drastically on the left side. So this is what we want to pay attention to. This is where I find that this is very useful instead of actually doing the center of the eye, because this kind of serves as a guide. You know, it's a lot easier to see a straight line and then kind of determine whether or not there's any kind of angle coming down or if it follows that straight line, instead of just guessing with a line that goes through the center of the eye. Okay, now we'll do the other one. So you notice this eye is a little bit smaller, a little bit slanted, just ever so slightly more. So those are the things that are going to be really unique about each individual. And those are the things that I find make portrait drawing kind of exciting. So I know some of you guys might like drawing very symmetrical people, and that's fine too. Makes your job a little bit easier. But in certain cases, some people who aren't extremely symmetrical, they make for really interesting subjects. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about the eyes. So when drawing the eyes, I almost never draw the bottom of the eye. That is to say, I don't draw eyes like this in which they're enclosed, because this is a little bit more symbolic. It's more of an idea of an eye, whereas I find that eyes are a lot more open if you draw starting with the fold, if it's visible on that individual, and then draw the iris itself. And instead of drawing the bottom of the eye and just simply rely on your shading, and I find that that kind of gives it a little bit more of an openness, and instead of a hard kind of enclosed way of describing the eye. So again, that's kind of an option for you guys, but I find that that strategy really seems to work for me. Okay, we'll go back to the other eye. And, you know, feel free to sort of explore a little bit as you go along and start developing things that you feel comfortable with. So, for example, the side of the face. So now I'm gonna talk a little bit about placement. So one of the things to keep in mind, for example, in terms of features, so this would be number 10, is the inside of the eye, so where the tear duct is. If you draw a line straight down, which is known as a plumb line, it should line up fairly close to the outside of the nose. And in this case, his nose is a little bit wider. So this is just a general guide. Some people's noses are going to be a little bit inside, and some people's are going to be a little outside, and others are going to be right on. So in this case, what I have to do is expand the nose just a bit on one side, and this one is pretty close. So again, I'm not measuring. This is just kind of to get you guys started with, let's draw a head, you know, and let's kind of make it fun. I know some of you guys might already be a lot more serious than others. You might be past the fun stage, but it's always good to start off with something that you enjoy, and you know, it can be information. It can be good information simultaneously while being something you enjoy. Okay, so all right, so now the middle of the mouth, and so the goal here is to actually just try and get that shape of the shadow, not necessarily the top part of the lip. So I find that that'll be a little bit easier because you're basically looking for the shape that the opening makes. And another tip is this center part of the eye, if you were to draw a line straight down, should be where the corner of the mouth actually is. So that would be step number 11. And so when drawing lips, always remember that the top lip is receiving more shadow than the bottom lip. Okay, so this, when you look at a side view of a face, the light's coming from this direction. what you'll see is the mouth kind of comes inward and then out. So this puts this particular top part of the mouth at an angle in which it can't receive too much light. So this is the reason why you end up with something like this. And the bottom has a little bit, of course it looks like he's got his mouth a little bit open. Alright, and then the labial mental fold doesn't require a whole lot of work. It's mostly a little shadow development. So, and then the 12th step would be, in case I haven't already mentioned it, start to develop the features as much as possible. So we want to take it out of this kind of angular effect, which I don't mind so much, but I know some people might be more interested in something that's a little bit more natural looking. So I have to make a little bit more of an effort to look for some of the curvature. And so I'll do this as I develop the drawing. I want to establish some passages of shadow. So what I see is this interesting angle from the zygomatic, which you don't have to know what that is, you just have to sort of pay attention to some of the shapes. Okay, so what I notice on my drawing is a little bit too square here. So we're going to round it out a little bit. And I apologize if the drawing is moving a little too much. I got kind of a wobbly easel I'm drawing on. So what I'll do is I'll sort of outline a little bit darker than I normally would. So it can show up on the video and you can see exactly what I'm doing. We'll develop the ear a little bit more. And in case I haven't mentioned, this is a drawing of an actor who's on Game of Thrones. A lot of you guys who may have already picked up on that. So I thought that might be kind of fun for the Game of Thrones fans. I always find that it's kind of good practice to draw people that you're not related to, because I find that when you start off with people who are related to you, there's a little bit of pressure that we tend to put on ourselves, even unknowingly, because we know them so well, and we sort of, we really want the drawing to turn out and the likeness to be really good. So I would say, as a beginner, I would start off with drawing people that you don't know, because there's not as much at stake, and I feel like you want to have as many drawings that you do that are confidence builders. So anyway, I think that kind of wraps things up a little bit. So here's a very quick sketch on my behalf, and one of the things I want to mention is, if you enjoy this instruction and you find this video helpful, I will have other videos where I talk about how to start shading, how to do cross-hatching and hatching, and then maybe do a more developed video where I really take my time and go for a really good likeness. But I would say for our time, which is about 15 minutes or so, I think I'm pretty happy with just the initial layout. So I think that we'll leave it where it is, and hopefully you guys found this helpful.